So according to John Calvin himself, God is the author of evil. And perhaps that's why Dr. White has not explained how Calvinism can escape the charge. Now, speaking of John Calvin, let's go to the horse's mouth. I have a quote here from him that I'd like to read. Here's John Calvin's own words. Quote, "How foolish and frail is the support of divine justice afforded by the suggestion that evils come to be, not by his will, but by his permission. It is a quite frivolous refuge to say that God obviously permits them, these evils, when Scripture shows him not only willing, but the author of these evils. Who does not tremble at these judgments with which God works in the hearts of even the wicked, whatever he will, rewarding them nonetheless according to desert? Again, it is quite clear from the evidence of Scripture that God works in the hearts of men to incline their wills just as he will, whether to good for his mercy's sake or to evil according to their merits." End quote. So although Calvin, unlike Dr. White, may not have been an exhaustive divine determinist, an ed guy, in the sense that I think Calvin would have found room for limited libertarian freedom in matters below or in earthly things. I discuss this in my book and quote Calvin quite a bit. And by the way, that's all you need for mere Molinism. As long as there's some libertarian freedom anywhere in the universe and God's still provident and predestines this and isn't surprised by it, then I would argue that at least mere Molinism is true. But Calvin here seems to affirm divine determinism not only in soteriological matters, but also regarding all moral choices anyone makes, whether they be a Christian or a non-Christian. So according to John Calvin himself, God is the author of evil. And perhaps that's why Dr. White has not explained how Calvinism can escape the charge. Indeed, God being the author of evil is part of Calvinism. In fact, I believe Dr. White once said in a conversation with Hank Hanegraaff something to the effect of God decrees child rape. Now, in a sense, the Molinist and the Calvinist are both going to agree with that, but we have to define and clarify what we mean by decree. By decree, the Molinist means that God created a world in which he knew that a free creature who was not causally determined and did not have to rape the child would freely choose to rape the child. But by decree, what White means is that God causally determined the man to rape the toddler. Now, if you find this absurd, if this is not the God you know and have a personal relationship with, then I contend that you ought to reject White's low view of God, as A.W. Tozer would say. At least that's what it seems to me to be here. And I would encourage you to reject this view of Calvinism and definitely reject exhaustive divine determinism, what I refer to as ED, EDD. So with that said, Tyson, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it was very clear from that quote that you just shared that Calvin rejected the language of permission. He basically said that's not a way out if you're going to read the Bible like I do. To say that God permitted people to do evil is to say that God somehow lost control over the situation. And so Calvin wanted to reject that. White in the dialogue used the term permission frequently. And so it seems like there's sort of a difference there. And so maybe we can just pose the question to White, does he agree with John Calvin on his rejection of permission language? Does he think that doesn't make any sense given the biblical data?